Thank you, Chairwoman Klobuchar. Again, thank you to our witnesses. I have a question to address to Secretary Toulouse-Oliver, Secretary Evnen, and Mr. Knapp. In recent years, election officials nationwide have faced an increasing number of cybersecurity threats from sophisticated and also very malicious actors. Specifically, during the 2022 election cycle, both Illinois and Mississippi experienced cyber attacks on their public election websites, which provide voters with that important information, such as precinct locations. While these attacks did not compromise voting systems themselves, this issue remains a serious and ongoing challenge. So if you could tell me, have your respective jurisdictions experienced cybersecurity incidents or threats, and what have your offices done that ensure that your state's voting systems and your elections are secure? Secretary Toulouse-Oliver, please.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member, for the question. So I think it's unfortunately safe to say that to one degree or another, every election jurisdiction in the country, certainly every statewide jurisdiction has received or has been the target of attacks or potential attacks. We know that there is constant, scanning of sites, attempts, phishing attempts. I joked with my staff one time that I personally thwarted the Russians because there was a phishing email that looked suspicious, and I reported it, and it followed the path through the ISAC and up to CISA, and it was identified as a foreign sourced phishing attempt. So the reality is that this is a threat that we are all dealing with all day, every day. And even the smallest jurisdiction in the country has the potential to be vulnerable to such threats. So in my state, and I'll be as brief as possible, but of course, one of the first things we did was create a robust partnership with, in particular, CISA, to utilize all the tools that they have available to us as a state jurisdiction and to push down to our local jurisdictions to both look for any potential vulnerabilities, to get advice and information about how to patch those up. As Secretary Evnen mentioned, we also have Albert sensors installed on our systems so that we are looking for odd patterns of internet traffic behavior coming into our systems so that we can be aware that maybe something's going on. We have created a very robust cybersecurity and really generally an election security program in my office that we recently took from just being a program initiative that I created to now being required by New Mexico state law. Moving forward, that there's always going to be such a program in my office. And the point is really to take the resources and tools that we receive from the federal government and from our private partners and be able to make sure that those are all available downward to every local election jurisdiction across the state.
Thank you. Secretary Evnen.
Thank you, Senator. We're fortunate in Nebraska that we haven't had any cybersecurity incidents in Nebraska. Nebraska was the first state to place an Albert monitor. This is a detection intrusion monitor system on the servers of a private vendor for our statewide voter registration system. And that, by the way, has now been replicated in 7 other states. In terms of our ballot tabulation machines, the computers that compile the results, these are air-gapped. They are not connected to the internet and for any purpose at any time. We've also placed additional Albert monitors in strategic locations throughout our state. And since 2018, all of our state's vendors that are part of our elections infrastructure have and continue to work with the Department of Homeland Security, in particular the Offices of Cyber Hygiene and Physical Security for best practices. And those aren't offices, those are principles and profiles, cyber hygiene and physical security best practices. All 93 counties in our state are members of the Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center. This is EIISAC. All 93 counties are members, and that is also a very valuable resource to keep up with the latest threats and the best practices.
And Mr. Knapp, if you could answer that, but also you have a lot of experience in dealing with Director of Voter Services. You were responsible for information technology, cybersecurity, in support of statewide voting systems. So how did that experience, I guess, did it shape your approach to cybersecurity a little differently than the secretaries, or do you have the same concerns?
I have the exact same concerns. Secretary Evden and I have the exact same voting system, which is not connected to the internet, so that's not a concern. But I will say South Carolina, the state, my agency, has not been a victim of a cyber incident, luckily. We have all the resources we could ever need with Homeland Security, CISA, ISAC, the FBI, our state law enforcement, our Department of Administration, which houses our networks. We have Albert sensors. We have everything possible to protect our statewide election system, which we house. I'd say the biggest vulnerability in South Carolina is probably our locals. Although the state of South Carolina, I'm sure, is inundated every second with attacks from adversaries. The biggest victims in my state of cybersecurity attacks are small municipalities, municipal utilities, and we are what's called a top-down state in that I supervise the county election offices, but counties are still autonomous. So if they don't want to accept help or spend their own resources on cybersecurity, they don't have to. But that being said, county election officials that have access to our statewide election system, they all undergo cybersecurity training. We do phishing campaigns in my office to ensure everybody is trained on that as well. So we do lots of training. I can say that my agency, at the state level, has every resource I can think of. But I do worry about my smaller counties and municipalities.
Okay, thank you. I almost called you Secretary Padilla.
Well, and I know why. As